Here we go, y'all. Listen, Peter Thomas stopped by Carlos King's podcast and he spilled all the tea, okay? So we're going to talk about why he says that Kenya Moore is the smartest woman that he's met on reality TV, how Nene was intimidated by him, and we got to get into this almost physical altercation between he and Todd that involved Apollo, okay? So listen, baby, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do so. Hit that notification bell button and join the texting community. All links are in the description of this video, okay? So Carlos King is back with another podcast, and this week's episode featured none other than Peter Thomas, okay? Listen, people can talk about Peter Thomas all they want to, but that man be getting into the business, okay, baby? He be getting them businesses going, all right? So it wasn't business that he had to talk about today, though. It was a little bit more, okay? So we about to get into all the tea that was discussed in the podcast, and then you can go listen to the podcast for yourself, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, okay? So we start by having a discussion with sort of how Peter got onto the housewives in general. So apparently, Cynthia did not know anything about casting for the Real Housewives of Atlanta. It was he who was the one who looked into it. She was declining as a print model, according to him, and she had just moved to Atlanta to be with him. So apparently she was actually terrified to do the Real Housewives of Atlanta casting. But then once they realized her background and then his background in the entertainment industry, which if you don't know about Peter's background in the entertainment industry, please listen to this podcast because the man has done a lot more than I ever actually knew, okay? And he's well known by a lot of people, all right? So the casting department thought it would be great to have people with actual careers, according to Peter, and not just people that were faking careers in the industry, okay? So he says that the first time that they tried working with her for casting, they weren't really feeling her because she wasn't that good, okay? Now, this is according to Peter, okay? Anyway, he says he had to talk her into going back in and really talking about who she was, the places that she had been, the things that she had experienced, especially in her modeling career, you know, really hyping herself up. Carlos actually said that Peter Thomas was the uncredited producer of Cynthia. And then Peter agreed and he said, yeah, for about the first 3 years, okay? So apparently Peter was maybe the person that was behind the scenes, hyping her up, kind of giving her direction about what to do. This is what I'm ascertaining from this conversation, okay? So they go into talking about how Peter also dated Nia Long and Peppa, but then we get back to the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Now, Carlos said that Peter is one of the reasons why the show became such a hit and that Peter wasn't afraid of Nene. Peter said that Nene had a reckless mouth, but he couldn't wait to tape with her. And he said that Cynthia was actually afraid of Nene. So Peter also felt like the guys should be a bit more involved. I mean, the show was called Real Housewives, so why would you not involve the men? He also says that he didn't like Phaedra from day one because he could tell that she likes to throw the rock and hide her hands and then push Portia to do her dirty work, and he called her very messy. So apparently in season 6, when Carlos became the showrunner, they all agreed that the men should have a voice and that the husbands made the wives more interesting. So apparently Carlos got into a little bit of trouble from with the network about this as well. But Carlos made sure that the men taped scenes together, and that is what he said he got in trouble for. And so that was ultimately what led him to creating Love and Marriage, because the men getting involved was equally as entertaining as having the women involved, and it also brought in the male viewers. So the two of them both agreed that it makes the show more interesting when the men are involved. And to be honest with you, I would have to agree. But the caveat to that is, for me, that the men have to be equally as dynamic or more dynamic than the wife, if that is the case. Because somebody in the relationship got to have the dynamic personality if they both don't have that big persona. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, apparently a lot of the women would get mad because the men were taking camera time from the women. So Cynthia allegedly used to get mad at Peter for taking away scene time from her and creating issues with her and Nene. But he felt like it was good for both of them because it kept the dynamic interesting for the show and it kept those checks coming in, okay? So apparently Cynthia and Nene used to talk on the phone in the morning and at night and all day long. And he thinks that Nene used to talk Cynthia out of letting him film so much because she was intimidated by him and, the husbands having so much screen time. Peter also says that he thinks that Kenya Moore is the smartest woman on reality TV because she understands that it's a job and she doesn't take any of it personally and she uses it to her advantage. Now, he goes on to talk about some advice that they got from Tyler Perry, who said that the best thing that they could do is to stay on TV to stay successful. And I was like, that is some pretty interesting advice. And it makes really a lot of sense. So he said that Kenya used to walk past him in the scene and kind of whisper to him that she's about to blow his head off. And he thought it was great. He says that he got reality TV and he used it to his advantage. Now, he said that Cynthia used to sit on pins and needles just waiting to hear if she would get a contract every year. And he would tell her that they were a shoo-in basically because they had nobody on the show who was like them as that particular couple. So with regards to pay, he was basically alluding to something like, and I'm hoping I don't get this wrong, but he would take 15% of whatever they made after their household bills were paid. So that's kind of how their arrangement for him to get paid and be compensated for his work on the show. So then they talked about, him and Greg, and before Greg passing and how he went to go see Greg before he passed and how Greg said to, look out for his wife for him. And, then 3 days later he passed. And a lot of people had thought that it had been Peter that introduced Nene to her new boyfriend, but Peter also knew the man and basically thought that he would be a good match for Nene. But I don't think he was the person that actually introduced them based on what I heard there. So then we get into this whole idea of this physical altercation between Peter, Todd, and Apollo. So apparently it was almost a fight. So apparently Apollo had just gotten out of jail, and for Apollo, apparently he came out mentally in the same space that he went in. And I guess for Todd, he was in a completely different space. And maybe he wasn't really messing with Apollo like that for some reason. And so apparently when Peter and Apollo, came into whatever club situation that they were in, Peter felt like Todd kind of like dissed him because he was with Apollo. And so apparently he felt like he didn't like the way that Todd was coming at him. So they squared up on each other and, Todd was with his crew or whatever, and they were up in each other's face and people had to separate them. Now, he recently said that he saw Todd in Vegas not too long ago. And, the two of them ran into each other or at around 4 a.m. when they were both by themselves in the hallway at the hotel that they were staying at. And they just kind of nodded at each other and kept it moving, and that they're cool to this day. Now, he also touched on Real Housewives of Potomac filming at his Bar 1 location in Miami. So apparently there was liquid thrown in someone's face and glass was thrown as well. So we're going to have to wait to see how that plays out. But, Carlos basically was speculating that it was between Mia and Wendy, as we had all done because we had seen the footage of the two of them getting into it when we were about a couple of weeks ago when the footage came out. So back to Peter's relationship with Cynthia. So most recently, he was mad at her because she tried to sue him for some property that he says still belonged to him. Well, I guess the property was still there. Something had went wrong with the deal. I cannot remember the details of it all. I remember the story coming out, but I couldn't really understand it at the time. So I didn't really cover it because it didn't really, I couldn't really figure out what was really going on with it. Anyway, he's really mad. Well, he was really mad about it because he found out, via the streets. And he said he sent a couple of $100,000 to his lawyer's trust to deal with the situation. He said he called her and basically they kind of settled the lawsuit with the $100,000 or however much he said he sent her. And she dropped it. And, he still apparently calls her every now and again just to check on, to see how she's doing. With regards to returning to reality TV, Peter says what I feel like I definitely can understand is that, he says his restaurants are booming right now and reality TV is time consuming. So it would have to be a show that he would really want to do in order for him to go back to reality TV in that way. And I honestly can say that I don't blame him. I'm sure if the check was right, though, he'd be all up in it. OK. But with that being said, that was it, man. It was actually a very, very interesting interview. I would highly suggest you check it out. The link will be in the description of this video. Take a listen, comment your thoughts below. I would love to hear them, and we will catch you guys in the next video.